Hello everyone. In the previous session, we have learnt about how you can create a virtual environment and how you manage one environment using Conda package and environment manager. Obviously, the very next step would be to understand how you write the code and how you execute the code that you have written. There are multiple means in which you can do the same. So one of the most popular practices is to use an integrated development environment. So I have listed down the most popular IDEs that are used in today's world by the data scientists and the developers across the community. All right. Before we pitch into discussing about what IDEs are and what is a specific IDE that we are going to look about considering in our subsequent sessions or in the subsequent exercises that we are going to conduct, let's discuss about the most basic way of writing Python code. So let me open up my terminal and let me navigate to test project folder that we have already created. Of course, I can go about looking at what are the contents of this directory, and we observe that there is an environment subdirectory that we have created in our previous session. Let me activate that environment by using conda activate test_env would activate the virtual environment for me. Once the virtual environment is active, the necessary objective here is to write Python code, isn't it? Let me check the Python version so that I'm making sure if I'm on the right version of Python or not. I'm okay with this version 3.11.2. Let me key in Python and hit enter. That will take me to open up a Python shell here, wherein you can run the Python code that you write, or in fact, you can execute or define any functions that you write or any classes that you write. You can write any code that you would want to here. I'm just writing a simple print hello world, right? That's all. Printing the result. I can go about performing some basic operations like additions or subtractions. Whatever result it is, it prints it out in the output. I can also define a function called myfunc here, provide a string or define a parameter as such. I can go about printing whatever parameter that I must have received within this function, and that's it. I get an indentation error here. So expected an indented block after function definition in line 1. Of course, you need to indent the statements that are defined within a function. So we can rewrite this whole thing. I should rewrite this whole my function that I have already written earlier in my previous step. And then give 4 spaces or a tab so that we're making sure that the statements that are defined in this particular function are starting from the right position here. Let me print whatever my string holds. And that's it. You have defined a function. You can call this my function by passing the necessary argument. What could be the my string value that you are looking at passing here? I'll say execute the Python code in REPL environment. All right. There you go. You get the result printed out. What exactly is this? This is the REPL environment that I was talking about. As and when you key in Python here, it opens up Python shell, which basically is a REPL environment. REPL stands for read, evaluate, print, and loop. So read is nothing but it's reading the commands that you have typed in. It's evaluating, it's printing, and it's also looping. That is rerunning few of the commands that you write here. For instance, you write an iterative for loop. Obviously, it reruns the commands that you must have written within the for loop, right? So this is the whole objective on the whole basic way of writing Python code and executing the code that you have written. Once you have done the necessary activity here, you can go about exiting this particular shell by just keying in exit. And here you can also look at IPython. IPython stands for interactive Python. It's again another Python shell that we have, but it's an enhanced interactive environment for Python with many features that are added when compared to your standard Python shell. So this is your standard Python shell, right? Which your Python distribution offers us. So whatever IPython shell that I have just opened up is not a standard Python shell. It's an enhanced interactive environment, not just a plain REPL environment. It's an enhanced interactive environment for running the Python code, which has basically many additional features when compared to your standard Python shell. Okay, I can rewrite the same code that I have already written. The very basic thing that I observe here is syntax highlighting, which you do not have. I also have this auto suggestion. I have not entered my function completely. but it's still suggesting me something, isn't it? And when I hit enter here, it's auto indenting. I explicitly had indented the statements that are defined in this function after I have seen this error, isn't it? Auto indentation feature is not present in your standard Python shell here, but rather I find that feature enabled in your IPython shell or interactive Python environment. I can go about printing whatever I receive in my string. I just made use of the auto completion feature here, that's all. I have not typed in the complete statement as such. I can call this function called my function with some string value, so that gets printed out here. So some string value is the value that I have passed as an argument while invoking this function called myfunc. I believe you have understood the basic differences that you have in between IPython and Python. What is what and all is what we have already understood. And of course, you can exit this IPython shell by just keying in exit in a similar manner as we have done earlier with respect to your Python shell. Okay. Once you have completed this activity, you can switch back to your slides and understand more about what are the different IDEs, right? The most popular IDEs nowadays are PyCharm, Visual Studio Code, Spider, and Jupyter. Jupyter and Spider are basically the ones that are extensively used for data science work. I'm not saying that people do not use PyCharm or Visual Studio Code. People tend to use Jupyter more because of the interactivity that it enables, or probably the features that it has when compared to other IDEs like PyCharm and Visual Studio Code. If you're developing something, if you're developing a backend completely for a specific web application, then I would suggest you to go with PyCharm or Visual Studio Code. For instance, if you would want to look at a specific visualization pertinent to some data that you must have pre-processed, and it's pretty much interactive, or it's pretty much easy for us to generate visualizations and look at it as and when you write the code. It's not that you cannot do that in PyCharm or in Visual Studio Code. You can do that, but I find using Jupyter to be in a more interactive manner than that of the other IDEs that I have listed here. All right. So there are something called code editors also. Okay. Code editors basically does not have all the features that an integrated development environment has. So integrated development environment has some additional features like debugging, code deployment and all. Code editors has got some plain features with respect to debugging. Most of the code editors do not have the deployment features that IDEs offers us. Otherwise, just all features like editing the code, syntax highlighting, auto completion and all is available in almost any editor. So Autumn and Sublime Text are two most popular code editors nowadays used by the community. We can also look at some editors like Brackets, all right, which mostly the web developers use. That's okay. We can use any editor. Almost every single editor, you can go about writing Python code and executing the Python code. Okay. That's all in this particular session. In the subsequent session, we are going to learn about what are the different features that Jupyter offers us, how you start off a Jupyter notebook on your local server, right? And how you start writing your code in Jupyter Notebook. Thanks for watching.